Herodias entered the pages of Scripture not as a silent figure standing behind a throne, but as a woman woven into one of the most tangled and morally decayed family lines in the ancient world. Her story began long before the head of John the Baptist ever lay upon a platter. It began within the fractured dynasty of Herod, where power was pursued through manipulation, betrayal, and forbidden unions that defied both divine law and human conscience. She was originally the wife of Philip, Herod Philip, one of the sons of Herod the Great. Their marriage, though steeped in political convenience, at least maintained the thin facade of legitimacy expected of royalty. But Herodias was not content with stability. Her ambitions pressed against the walls of her marriage, searching for a doorway into greater influence, greater status, greater control. That doorway appeared in the form of Herod Antipas, her husband's own brother.
Their union was not merely scandalous, it was unlawful. It violated Mosaic Law, ignored moral order, and spat openly in the face of the God who had set clear boundaries for marriage. Herodias abandoned Philip and took Antipas as her husband, collapsing what remained of family honor beneath the weight of her desire for a more powerful throne. But sin rarely hides quietly in shadows. It demands to be confronted, and the one chosen by God to confront this union was John the Baptist. John did not whisper warnings. He did not veil the truth in diplomacy. He spoke with the thunder of a prophet, whose words echoed across deserts and pierced through palaces. "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." The words struck the air like a blade. Herodias heard them, she felt them, and she hated them. To her, John was not a prophet of righteousness. He was an obstacle, a threat to her reputation and her grasp on power. The same spirit that once stirred within Jezebel now burned within Herodias. The refusal to submit, the fury against God's voice, the willingness to spill innocent blood to silence truth. Thus Herodias stepped into the story as more than a queen. She entered as a warning, a figure whose lineage, choices, and defiance would set the stage for one of the most chilling acts of vengeance recorded in the New Testament. Herodias' hatred for John the Baptist did not burst forth in a moment. It grew like a poisoned vine, twisting around her heart, tightening with every word the prophet spoke. For John did what no courtier, no noble, no trembling official dared to do. He confronted her sin beneath the full weight of God's authority. His voice, rough from wilderness winds and desert nights, cut through the marble halls and silken curtains of Herod's palace like a blade drawn from heaven. He named her union with Herod Antipas for what it was: unlawful, adulterous, a mockery of the law given through Moses. And with every truth he spoke, Herodias felt her power tremble. She despised him for it. To her, John was not simply a man. He was a threat, a crack in the throne she fought to secure, a living reminder that no crown can silence divine truth. She longed to see him silenced, not through debate or reason, but through death. She wanted the prophet's voice extinguished, his warnings buried, his presence erased like a blemish from her ascendancy. In the shadows of her chambers, her anger smoldered. In her heart, her hatred sharpened into a plan. But Herod Antipas was not like her. Fear curled around his spirit whenever he stood before John. He had seen many men, soldiers, rulers, rebels, but none carried the peculiar weight that John carried. Antipas sensed something sacred in him, something beyond political influence or human strength. John's gaze seemed to look past men and into the very places where God himself speaks. And so, even as Herodias demanded blood, Antipas hesitated. He feared the crowds who revered John as a prophet of the Most High. He feared the consequences of killing an innocent man. But most of all, he feared the strange holiness that clung to John like desert dust. So he chose a compromise that would only delay the inevitable. He had John seized, bound in chains, and thrown into the dark pit of a prison carved beneath his fortress. A cell where no sunlight reached, where the air itself felt heavy with unspoken judgment. It was a cage not strong enough to silence truth, but strong enough to quiet Herodias' demands, for a time. Yet even there, John's presence unsettled the king. Herod would summon him, listening to his words with a mixture of fascination and dread, unable to fully comprehend the message, but drawn to it nonetheless. It was as if the echo of God's voice clung to every syllable. Herodias saw her husband's hesitation, and her hatred only deepened. For she understood something dangerous. A man who fears a prophet can never fully obey a queen. And so, the seed of murder waited within her, silent, patient, venomous, until the perfect moment arrived. The night of Herod Antipas's birthday was meant to be a celebration, an evening of music, wine, and the glittering pride of a king who loved the applause of men far more than the whisper of conscience. Nobles reclined at his table, commanders boasted of victories, and torches flickered against the marble walls like restless spirits. But beneath the laughter, beneath the shimmering spectacle, a darker plan waited, coiled, silent, deadly. Herodias had not forgotten John. The prophet's words still echoed in her mind like a burning brand. It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. What John spoke in truth, she received as humiliation.
What heaven meant as correction, she turned into hatred.
She had begged, plotted, and schemed for John's death, but Antipas wavered, paralyzed by fear of the people and by the strange, haunting respect he held for this man clothed in camel's hair. So Herodias waited, and the feast provided her moment. Into the banquet hall stepped her daughter, adorning the night like a flame dancing against the darkness. Her movements captivated the room. Even the drunkest guest fell silent. Antipas leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her with a mixture of delight and intoxication. When she finished, applause thundered through the palace. And in that intoxicated triumph, Herod spoke the words that sealed the fate of a prophet. "Ask me for whatever you want, and I will give it to you, even up to half my kingdom." A reckless oath, a foolish boast, a king entrapped by his own arrogance.
The girl slipped away to her mother, her pulse still quick from the dance, unaware that she carried the power of life and death in her hands.
Herodias did not hesitate. She did not waver. She did not blink. "Ask for the head of John the Baptist," she said, with a voice as sharp as a blade drawn in the dark. The girl returned, carrying her mother's cruelty in her innocence, and stood before the king. Her request fell upon the hall like a thunderclap. "I want you to give me, right now, the head of John the Baptist, on a platter." Silence. The king froze. His face drained. His soul recoiled. He feared John. He respected him. He had listened to him speak with a curiosity he never admitted aloud. And now, in the echoing stillness of the feast, he felt the cold sting of regret pierce his heart. But the eyes of his guests were upon him, judging, waiting, holding him captive. And Herod, lover of reputation more than righteousness, bowed not to God, but to pride. He summoned the executioner. Down the corridor, into the depths of the prison, the guard descended. A door creaked. A blade rose. A head fell. And the last prophet before Christ entered eternity in the silence of a dungeon lit by torches that flickered like dying stars. Moments later, in the middle of the feast, the executioner returned, carrying a platter upon which rested the severed head of John the Baptist. The girl took it, and as she carried it to her mother, the music faltered, the joy died, and the night that began in celebration ended in blood. Thus Herodias' hatred triumphed for a moment. Thus prophecy moved closer to fulfillment. Thus the greatest voice crying in the wilderness was silenced. But his message would only burn brighter. The dungeon was cold, carved deep beneath Herod's palace, where the air hung heavy with damp stone and unspoken dread. In that darkness sat John the Baptist, the voice that once thundered in the wilderness, now confined behind iron bars. Yet even chained, he remained unbroken. The truth he carried could not be silenced, not by walls, not by chains, not by the trembling fear of a king. But above him, in the glittering halls where music still lingered from the birthday feast, a decision had already been sealed. Herodias wanted him dead. Her daughter had spoken the request with a chilling innocence, the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And Herod, bound by pride and oath, could not withdraw his promise. The king who feared the judgment of the people now feared the judgment of his guests even more. So he nodded, and destiny descended into the depths of the palace like a shadow with a sword. The executioner moved swiftly. His footsteps echoed down the stone corridor, a rhythm of impending death. He knew the order. He did not question it. When he reached the cell, he found John in stillness, calm, resolute, a man who had prepared his whole life for a moment such as this. There was no bargaining, no protest,
Only a faith that shone even brighter in the darkness.
one stroke, one final breath, one life poured out like an offering. And then it was done. The executioner lifted the prophet's head, still crowned with the rugged glory of obedience, and placed it upon a cold platter of polished metal. The contrast was almost unbearable. Holy truth resting upon a dish meant for a feast. Carried upward through the winding passageways, the platter glimmered beneath torchlight like a silent accusation. When he entered the banquet hall, the music faded, the conversation stilled, and every eye followed the dreadful gift. He presented it first to the girl, as the king had commanded, and she, an instrument in her mother's scheme, carried it to Herodias. And Herodias received it. The woman who could not silence truth with argument silenced it with blood. The prophet who confronted her sin now lay before her as a trophy of vengeance, his final sermon preached without a single word. Yet even in death, John's witness did not vanish. His blood joined the long line of martyrs who stood for righteousness, and his voice continued to echo, not only in the courts of Herod, but through the ages, warning kings and kingdoms alike. Truth may be murdered, but it cannot be defeated. The platter was carried away, the feast resumed, but heaven had already recorded the crime, and the judgment written beside Herodias' name would follow her like a shadow that never slept.